Hello and welcome to the build-up in association with Ladbrokes. I'm your host, David Gillick, and I'm joined by Ladbrokes ambassador and former Ireland international, Stephen Ferris. Stevie, what's the crack? How are you?
Good, thanks. Just finished watching off David Gillick compete in RTE's Survivor. What's it called?
Ultimate Hell Week.
Oh, that's it, Ultimate Hell Week. Well, congratulations. I didn't actually get to see the final couple of episodes, but I hear you passed with flying colours. Is that right?
That's right, Stevie. This is meant to be my interview. I'm meant to be interviewing you there. All right. Yeah, look, no, I did. It was good. Great experience. Incredibly difficult. And probably so to do.
No. I was asked to do it there a couple of years ago, and then I sort of give a few other names that might be interested. But Big Billy Holland, I obviously played a bit of rugby with, really top man. As you probably gathered, he's mentally very strong and very resilient character, and I knew he would love it as well. So no, it was good. But yeah, just on the rugby over the last couple of weeks, David, the URC has been flying. Obviously lots of negativity coming out of the Gallagher Premiership with teams going into administration and all sorts. So it'll be very interesting to see how that affects the English national team over the next couple of weeks. They obviously face Argentina this weekend, but most importantly, it's the South African teams and the Irish teams that are flying high in the United Rugby Championship. And what do we have this weekend? We have South Africa versus Ireland at the Aviva Stadium at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. So it's going to be a belter. It's the game of the weekend for sure. We can talk about Fiji and Australia, but let's be honest here. Everybody is just fully focused on Ireland versus South Africa. It's the only game any Irish fan is interested in. First in the world rankings versus third in the world rankings. The Rugby World Cup 2019 winners in South Africa, and they've picked a bloody good side. So it's going to be a cracking day.
Yeah, and look, it is. It's the Autumn Internationals. It's Saturday night, India Viva, 5:30. The atmosphere, you know what that's all about. When you have two teams, of that caliber coming in, and you referenced, number one side in Ireland in the world, South Africa, the reigning world champions. Ireland are, our favourites. That is something that people have kind of spoken about. When you look at kind of form wise, what do you see? Like, obviously, from an Irish perspective, you look at the series from down in New Zealand. You might look at South Africa as well, their recent kind of series as well. What do you see in terms of the teams coming into the Aviva?
Well, it's an interesting one because Ireland haven't played South Africa for 5 years. And since then, South Africa went and won a World Cup. They went and beaten the British and Irish Lions. They're arguably the best side in the world. And I think the Irish boys, Andy Farrell, Johnny Sexton, kind of referenced that in their pre-week leading up to the match interviews around, they feel South Africa the best team in the world. And yes, there's a little bit of deflection there, isn't there? Put the pressure back onto them. They're the team that's got it all to do, coming away from home. This big, strong, powerful, physical side. Let's see what they're made of. But nobody expected Ireland to go to New Zealand and get a win, never mind a Test series win. And I was probably one of those fans and pundits and enthusiasts of Irish rugby that didn't give them much of a chance out there, because history would tell you that it was France in 1994 that got the last Test series win, and for Ireland to do that will just give the guys so much confidence and so much belief that they can beat anybody in the world on Irish soil, New Zealand soil, South African soil, and more importantly, French soil in 2023 when the Rugby World Cup kicks off in September next year. So Ireland are in a really good place. The only concern is that they have a number of key players that have had very little to no game time this year. The likes of Tadhg Furlong, Gibson Park, Hugo Keenan. That's three really strong areas. Your front row, your 9-10 combination, and your backfield lieutenant in Keenan, who really need to, be at it from the first minute. That's the only concern. The other kind of looking at the bench options, if guys like the three that I just mentioned aren't going to play 80 minutes, then you got to have cover on the bench, and guys who are in form, guys who also have a bit of experience to be able to close down the South African side. But apart from that, I think there's going to be a lot more kicking in this match than people are maybe hoping for. We seen against the All Blacks a couple of years ago in the first minute, Ireland ran it out from their own 22 and set a tone from the first minute of the match and got on top of the All Blacks. And South Africa are a different beast. They are a different beast. You just look at Kitskoff up front, Malherbe in the front row. Then you put Malcolm Marx in between those two lads. Peter Steph Toy, he's back in action. He was out for nearly a year with a neck injury after that first test in the British and Irish Lions. What a unit he is. Great line-out operator. You throw in the two huge second rows. Jasper Wiese. It's superstars just keep coming off it really is. And Cheslin Colby at fullback. They've mixed and matched a little bit in their back three, but they are going to be a real force. And Ireland have got to meet fire with fire and implement their own game plan. And I'm sure there's been enough work done this week to make sure that they don't give the South African side too many opportunities.
You referenced that South African team, and you kind of touched on the strength in depth and the bench that they have. When you look at the team that they've named, it's a kind of a rugged kind of forward group, but then you look at their bench. Do Ireland as a collective have those resources? Do we have that bench that can come in and change the game? You reference again a couple of players that maybe struggled a little bit with injury. There's a lot to this. That world number one kind of tag, the pressure that comes with the expectation, but then you're up against a team that has that strength in depth. How do Ireland approach that? Because they're yet to name their own team. So, from your perspective, how do you contain, or do you literally meet fire with fire and just go heavy into it? What is the game plan from Andy Farrell's perspective?
Well, if they can hold on to possession for long periods, like they've done very well over the last couple of years against any team in World Rugby, then they will create opportunities. The South Africans like to fly up in defence. It's an up and in defence. They, Cheslin Colby will come up and off his own bat make a read, and 9 out of 10 times they're usually good reads, and they stop the attack at source. Then all of a sudden there's a messy breakdown. Then all of a sudden you're scrambling back into an attacking shape to try and get things moving again. But Ireland have just got to continue working on their attacking shape, because we all know the pot of three. Every team now is sort of taking a leaf out of Ireland's book. You've got the option inside, the option outside, and of course the option behind. Many times do we see Tadhg Furlong taking the ball up, and as soon as he gets to the line, he pulls it back 4 or 5 yards, and Johnny Sexton hits James Lowe or Hugo Keenan or whoever it is, and puts him through a gap, and that's what they got to continue to work on. But you got to have even more variations. And when I say more variations, that has to come from your kicking game. That has to come from keeping it tighter when Ireland are up against it, and they just have to pick and jam. They're on their lines, coming up with a couple of trick plays that might create a few holes. And it's a work in progress. And Andy Farrell's always said this. He's always said it for the last couple of years since he came in. We are not the finished article, and they're number one in the world. They're beating New Zealand every time they seem to play them these days. How times have changed, and they're always a work in progress, and I love that. I really do. And it's more on the other side of the ball that's in the defensive line that would have me a little bit worried, just because of the power, the way the South Africans are able to generate momentum, just because of 125 kg guy who is seriously powerful and explosive, being able to get through a tackle and get an offload away, and before you know it, you're in scramble mode. And if Johnny can move this back three around, pin them back, play the areas of the pitch, we don't know what the weather's going to be like, and then when they have the ball, try and retain it for as long as possible and wear down these South Africans.
Yeah, and it's always kind of interesting, these autumn internationals come around, but this has that added spice that you're looking ahead to next year, the World Cup. Obviously, South Africa again, group games and things like that. Selection, who's coming through. And you mentioned there that Andy Farrell keeps saying we're not the finished article, which is probably what you want in the year prior to a World Cup. So, from that perspective, then, is it like players like Johnny Sexton, okay, people like this that, there's been a bit of chat around, where are they going to be in a year's time? But is this sort of an opportunity now for Andy Farrell and his management to begin to kind of look at what might happen in a year's time? putting people in, bringing players in, bench, all that sort of stuff that you mentioned, is now the opportunity to try these against the caliber of South Africa?
No, it's not. It's all about beating South Africa. Like, if Ireland get beaten by South Africa at the weekend, then all of a sudden we're not going to get out of a Rugby World Cup quarterfinal. Like, that's 1 week to the next. That's what happens in professional sport. If Ireland win by 2 points, Ireland are going to win the Rugby World Cup because they've just beaten the Rugby World Cup 2019 champions. So Ireland are going to play their strongest side. They have to play their strongest side, try and build on what they achieved over New Zealand, and try and bring that forward to the end of it. Fiji, of course, there's going to be lots of changes, number of changes. There might be a few changes when it comes to Australia in the last game. But then it's about keeping it going into the Six Nations. They'll be playing their strongest team for the majority of those games. And then it's about firing into a Rugby World Cup. And I said it like 2 years ago, like the team 2 years ago, I didn't think there was going to be very much change to the team that started the first game of the Rugby World Cup 3 years later. And we talk about strength and depth. I think Ireland do have strength and depth, but there is absolutely no question that Ireland have 23 players that are probably slightly better than the next 10 or 15 below that. And that's where, if you pick up 3 or 4 injuries in a big campaign like a World Cup, then it's backs against the wall time, where it feels, as you referenced, the South African bench strong. New Zealand, they can bring a lot of players in. They can do the same job. And then you have France, who just have a conveyor belt of quality players. So I think it's going to be best team against South Africa this weekend. See how it goes next weekend. There'll be a number of changes. Anybody who's going to raise their hand up and say, pick me for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Somebody like Stuart McCloskey, who's been playing brilliantly for Ulster every single week. There's only 3 centres picked in this Irish squad: Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose, and Stuart McCloskey. I'd love to see him get a start against Australia. I really would. I think he deserves it. With Ireland's first choice pack, Ireland's first choice halfbacks, Ireland's first choice back three, and then McCloskey. Let's see how he goes in there, because I do think he has something to add to this Irish team. So if there's somebody who a year ago we weren't really talking about being involved in a Rugby World Cup for Ireland, it was probably him, because there's so many other quality players ahead of him. Now with Bundy out, if he puts in a good performance over the next couple of weeks or gets that opportunity, he really could be a bolter for the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France.
Yeah, and obviously you're kind of touching on selection there as well, and you've been following, obviously, through your own work with the URC. Is there any other players that you can reference that think, might get an opportunity, should get an opportunity? If you are in Farrell's shoes, who and where would you be looking?
Yeah, there's a big game this weekend for the A's. Ireland A are playing. It's being captained by Craig Casey, the Munster scrum half. Everybody thought he would have been on the bench this weekend against South Africa. That's obviously not going to happen. But him being given the captain's armband, I listened to an interview from Craig, and he was like, and he just kind of pulled him aside and just started chatting. And then all of a sudden, he sort of gave him the captaincy for the game. And obviously, huge honour and a lot of pride. But I think that sort of respect shown by Andy sort of shows to me that he rates him. And he rates him very highly. And it'll be really interesting to see how this scrum half bench position plays out over the next year, because Craig Casey brings so much tempo, pace. He's that scrum half. It's just always there at the breakdown. He's got arguably the best pass in Irish rugby. It's on a plate every time for Sexton or Carberry, whoever it may be at out half. So I think he's certainly one to watch going forward in the next season. He might get a start in the Six Nations. I definitely think he's going to get a start in the autumn here. So Craig Casey for me. Somebody else, I know Rob Balakoon has played brilliantly for Ulster over the last couple of seasons. He's an out-and-out winger, huge pace. A bit like some of the South Africa, a bit like Matt Pimpey, for South Africa. Just somebody who can get that outside break, is a very strong tackler. His kicking game maybe not as good as James Lowe. He's maybe not as busy around the fringes as James Lowe as well. But if you're needing pace to come off a bench and get you a try scoring or a winning try from absolutely nowhere. He can certainly do that. So Rob Balogun, I think, again, probably deserves an opportunity. And he has got pace really does have pace to burn. He's probably the fastest winger in Irish rugby.
Well, okay, well, definitely one to watch. So let's kind of go back. Saturday, 5:30. Put your money where your mouth is. What way is it going to go? Because it's going to be tight. People are picking up as an arm wrestle. So, what way do you see it going?
I can't see South Africa beating Ireland. Like, I don't know. Historically, Ireland have struggled against power teams. Struggled against teams that are very one-dimensional, very don't mind running into a green wall all day and eating it up. And like, I played in that 2009 game where Johnny Sexton, I think it was his second cap for Ireland, started that match. And I was playing in that game in the fog, if you can remember, in Croke Park. The fog descended, and all of a sudden, Sexton, you could barely even see the post, and he was just kicking them through. And like, in Ireland's game plan that day was completely different to what it is now. We kicked the leather off the ball, hit a few rocks, but most of the day it was chasing shadows because South Africa just come at us with huge physicality. I think it's going to be a different game plan altogether, with Ireland wanting to play a bit more rugby, but I think it's going to be the same result. I think it's going to be Ireland, 5 points, 6 points. So I think the handicap at the minute is 3 points in the game. And I would be back in Ireland to beat that handicap. And if they don't beat that handicap, then there's going to be huge questions asked of how good this Ireland team is going to be getting into the Rugby World Cup next year.
Yeah, look, it's exciting stuff. And obviously we have Fiji to come and then Australia. More opportunities for the Irish team, but I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it is all kind of about Saturday, and when you have a team like South Africa coming to Dublin, it's a huge opportunity for Ireland to really get up there with some of the best in the world.
Yeah, no, this is the game that you want as a player who has aspirations of testing yourself and bringing the best out in yourself. And the boys will be in the gym this week lifting weights, and they'll be lifting weights knowing that James Ryan's probably on the bench press as we probably speak, with probably 60 kg dumbbells or something. And I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's seeing Etzebeth lift 65s in each. And everything this week gets ramped up. It does, it really does. The intensity in training, putting an extra few kgs in the bar in the gym during the week. Why? Because you're coming up against an even bigger, stronger physical team. And I did it myself. And Paul O'Connell did it, Donegal Callahan did it, Brian O'Driscoll did it. We all were there. We've all been in that boat, and we all, relish the opportunity to test yourself against a huge monster pack physical side and see how you come out the other end of it. So, it's going to be a huge challenge for the lads, but I think they're a better rugby team. And I think that's what's going to get them over the line.
Excellent stuff. Stevie, thanks as always. And remember, if you are betting on anything this weekend, please gamble responsibly. Visit gamblecare.ie for more information. We'll be back next week for more of the build-up brought to you by Ladbrokes.